Congressman Scott Peters, thank you for taking a few minutes to join us today. First, I want to ask you about you've been a leading voice on trying to get something done on permitting reform, and you introduced legislation, the Speed and Reliability Act, with Republican Congressman Andy Barr just last month. I think you reintroduced it from previous Congresses. Wonder if you could tell us a little bit about that and generally your efforts and kind of your vision for how you think things should go here.
Well, so transmission is one of the many things we're not building here. And so just to give you a perspective, since 2014, North America has developed 7 gigawatts of large-scale interregional transmission, about half that in the United States, a little less than half that in the United States. The comparable number in South America is 22, in Europe is 44, and China is 260. We're gonna have all sorts of problems with that going forward, but it's pretty clear that what we have is not working. So we have this existing NIETC process, a National Interest Electric Transmission Corridor process at the Department of Energy. And FERC is supposed to speed siting, and the idea is that they'll designate these high impact transmission lines, and then they will get built, but they don't get built. Over the 20-year history of this process, it hasn't yielded a single transmission project. There's lots of reasons for that, but opposition is easier than action. And also, you can give FERC backstop authority like we've done. Actually, I wrote the bill that Senator Manchin put into the infrastructure bill. But even if they have the authority, that doesn't mean that they'll use it. So we want to do a few things to make sure that we're getting the regulatory framework for transmission to be actually workable. So this takes the Secretary of Energy's authority to designate NEITCs, NIETCs. It allows FERC to issue a construction permit for individual lines that reduce grid congestion, improve reliability, and then provide a clear economic or other benefits to consumers. It allocates costs in a fair way so that people that benefit pay the price. And it allows preserves existing law to let states kind of figure out how to respond to applications before you can go to FERC, but it gives us the 1 year out. So if you don't get what you want and no one's taking action, that won't be the end of it. FERC can take it on. It responds a little bit to the idea that the market can determine where these lines are better than maybe a government process. So it would facilitate that. And obviously, everybody knows the benefits of building out the grid in terms of cost reduction, reliability, national security, and everything else. So we got to figure out how to get it done. And current situation just isn't working.
So how do you view the trade-offs with permitting reform that would be essential to getting something done, especially given just the reality of the makeup of this Congress and how Washington is at the moment? Obviously, there's some there's some progressives, for example, that don't want to touch NEPA and maintain kind of the status quo, even though we're dealing with challenges with deployment, the kind of issues that you're familiar with. How do you deal with those trade-offs in your mind?
From a climate action perspective, it's very clear that we have to modernize the environmental laws, which ironically are in the way of environmental improvement in many cases. And the reason is this. Something like 85% of the projects that wanted to get built before the Trump administration came in were non-emitting, and we weren't building anything. So in the service of stopping oil and gas, we were stopping everything. And in my view, if you can get 85% if you can get 85 by giving up 15, you make that deal every single day, because that's to the benefit of the climate. And if you don't make that deal, you're going to get what you have today, which is certainly suboptimal from a climate perspective. But don't even talk about climate change. I think, look, the president declared it's a hoax. Fine. We don't need to talk about climate change. But let's talk about the role of renewables in energy supply, and think about it this way. Last year, the United States developed, I think, 60 gigawatts of new generation total, right? In China, they developed 90 just of coal. I don't want coal, but it's not economic here. But 90 of coal in China, 80 in wind, and 277 gigawatts in solar. Now, are they doing that because they're some sort of climate action warriors? No, they're doing that because it's the fastest way to get power into the wires and to businesses and to people. What we're doing under the big bill that the Republicans passed is we're removing all the incentives for that. We're actually going to kill a lot of the deals that are in process because we're going to kill their financing by removing the incentives. And unless they can get through the bar in time in this very short deadline we've given them, then we're going to lose up to 300 gigawatts of power that we would have built under the act. And it's worse than that because the Trump administration isn't even permitting wind at all. I don't believe they're going after existing projects that are already permitted, wind projects like Revolution Wind. We just heard also that they're playing it slow with solar too. BLM in California announced about Bureau of Land Management. They're not even processing any solar permits in California on federal land. So we're really shooting ourselves in the foot by not going after renewables. Forget climate, just as a matter of supply and cost. We're really shooting ourselves in the foot.
So many cycles ago, you were a frontline member, and I'm curious how you would advise. You kind of touched on this kind of emerging debate on how to talk about these issues in a way that actually resonates with voters. And so I wonder if you were advising a colleague of yours in a frontline district, how would you tell them to talk about clean energy and climate?
Whether you're Donald running for president or Zoran running for mayor, you talked about the cost of things, right? And America is going to see an increase in the demand for electricity about 15% in the next decade. For the first time, we're going to see a big increase. And uh, when we see like 1 or 2% over the last couple of decades, what's going to happen to your costs if we don't build energy to meet that demand? I think that's the clearest thing to say is why is the Trump administration, why are Republicans standing in the way of more energy? Oh, by the way, Texas is not behaving this way. Um, Texas, to deal with their reliability issues, they reduced their risk of blackouts from 10% to 1% from oil and gas. No, the gas system failed in Winter Storm Uri. They did it through solar and batteries, and that's kind of what the real world. So I would just say, look, the real world is going after as much energy as you can get, the fastest and cheapest. A lot of that's going to be wind and solar, and we got to pursue it. I think cost control is the most important thing. Secondarily, you can talk about reliability. If we don't have enough power, we're going to see brownouts and blackouts. And fortunately, I live in a place where the weather's not too extreme, but even in Texas, you saw people die because of cold weather, and we're going to see more of that. And third, in terms of national security, how are we going to compete with China if we don't have any power? So there's lots of reasons why people of any who are interested in anything should be interested in this. Not to mention climate change, which I still talk about, but I know it's not in fashion in the White House. But we'll build a lot more renewable if we build everything faster.
Are you hearing anything from your constituents in light of the big bill and the attacks on clean energy that have been nonstop over the last several months? Are you hearing anything in your district about that?
Yeah, I mean, I have a pretty robust clean energy sector here. A lot of wind and solar developers. Obviously, they have to figure out how to move forward after a lot of the incentives that they had counted on were cut out. Chris Wright, the Secretary of Energy, came to our committee, and he said how unfair it was he was speaking on behalf of oil and gas projects, to take existing law and change it while people were in the process of getting permitted. And I said, well, what are you doing with wind and solar? He didn't seem to see, he seemed to understand the same dynamic applies. So, I mean, really, we can go back to talking about all of the above, which President Obama used to talk about. And I think that makes the most sense for people. People know we need more. We need everything. We know natural gas and gasoline aren't going away tomorrow. Let's make them as clean as we can, but let's keep costs down by building more power. And let's not get in the way of businesses who are trying to innovate. And the other big risk we face as a result of the Trump and Republican policies, the disinvestment will mean that our companies, our American companies, won't be leading on innovation on these things around the world. We won't get the economic benefit of the inventions that'll happen around clean energy because other countries are outcompeting us. And I think that's a concern of a lot of my business community here in San Diego.
Finally, what's something about you that might surprise people?
I can sing. I can sing, but
The
you won't
floor is
really hear.
yours. The floor is
Huh?
yours.
No, no. I've seen films of people singing, but I can sing a little bit, and but that's a paid gig. You don't get that for free, Chris.
Well, we'll have to find out when your gig schedule is and share that with folks.
All right.
Congressman, thank you so much for joining us. Appreciate your time, and we'll certainly be keeping an eye on discussions around permitting and everything else related to clean energy in the coming months.
Thanks, Chris. Appreciate it.
Thank you.